All right, well, it's time now for Perspective. And my guest today is Marlene Engelhorn, a 30-year-old Austrian heiress set to inherit millions of euros. But what sets her apart is what she plans to do with that money. Now, she co-founded the organization Tax Me Now, which, as the name suggests, is an association of ultra-wealthy individuals advocating for tax justice in Germany, Austria, and in Switzerland. Marlene, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So can you first just maybe tell us about your situation, how you came into your fortune?
You said it, I'm going to inherit it. So I was just born and I'm going to get millions just because of that.
I imagine it's the fruit, though, of the labor of your ancestors.
It's essentially the fruit of the labor of many people who will not see a dime of that and who are constantly neglected, and now a way of distributing the rewards of an economy that really largely relies on the fact that many people work in different fields together to produce what we call wealth.
I imagine you kind of answered it a bit there, but how did you ultimately reach the conclusion that your situation is unjustified?
It took a lot of conversations and interaction with a lot of people who come from different backgrounds, but frankly, it shouldn't be about whether or not I get to this point or not. I think we should have structures that are politically and socially working against the fact that high net wealth is accumulated in private hands while the public sector is in dire need for money.
So you live in Austria, if I understand well. Many people think that Western European nations, at least wealthy individuals there, are already taxed enough. What are some of the fiscal laws in places like Austria or Switzerland and Germany, in the countries where you work, that make the situation of the ultra-rich particularly advantageous? In other words, how is it possible that they're not taxed enough?
It's not possible because we have a lobby of, we call it in German, the lobby of big money, that is really strategically influencing everybody in the decision-making and power positions in order to avoid taxes on wealth. And that's really the only tax category where you see this sort of exemption. In Austria, for instance, you have neither an inheritance tax, nor a gift tax, nor a wealth tax, and the capital gains tax is ridiculous. In Germany, it's similar. They do have an inheritance tax, but the loopholes inside, once again, benefit high net wealth. And really, the funny thing is, if you, let's say you inherit 3 apartments in Germany, you will pay your inheritance tax. But if you say inherit 300, you won't. You automatically won't. You automatically are considered in a different category. Or if you inherit a business worth more than 26 million in Germany, you are automatically excluded from the inheritance tax as well, because then you are in need. So these laws don't make it easy. Sorry.
So you have committed to giving away 90% of your fortune, but only in the form of tax, not as a donation. So 2 questions come from that. Is there an infrastructure, a tax infrastructure, provided that, as you said, the inheritance tax doesn't exist? How are you going to be able then to give that money, that 90%, in the form of tax? And also, why not just donate?
Firstly, I said at least 90%, since it's a dodgy number that we're working with that I don't really know yet. I was careful with choosing that number. But at the same time, like, as I want to be taxed, I also want the democratic process that precedes it. It's like, you can't get a tax just by enforcing it. You have to go the long way. You have to go the marathon route. Having everybody in society talk about the subject and think about this in a way that it's a democratic decision. You know, you can't just ask for the percentage that you like and then you get it. Well, frankly, that's exactly what happens. Wealthy people ask for 0% tax and they get it, and that's not how it should be done. So the problem now is, I'm most likely not going to be taxed according to what I believe is fair and just. And so that means I will most likely have to go the private redistribution route, which is just a fancy way of saying have to donate it. I don't like this idea at all, and I'm currently working with a lot of people together in order to figure out a plan that makes sense. But really, it's a situation where all of the effort is first and foremost going into tax justice advocacy work, because through taxes is the only way it's going to be done fairly and democratically. And this is what I want, and I want to respect that.
In an ideal world, in your view, would millionaires simply be taxed more? Would they simply just avoid putting their assets in fiscal paradises? Or do you think that even the concept of being a millionaire shouldn't exist? Where do you draw the limit of how much money is too much?
This is a very important question. Frankly, I don't have an answer to that. Like I have a private one for me personally, but it's purely fed from my own perspective. So that doesn't count for everybody, and it doesn't work in a society. But there are scientists who are currently working on this, economists who are working on this and tackling this issue. A lot of paper have been published, especially in the UK, regarding that recently. And I think it's important to acknowledge what wealth in a certain dimension, in a certain amount, does when it's held privately. And frankly, what it does, it's accumulating power as well. It's not just about what you can and cannot spend and how you have a freedom of choosing whatever fancy brand you want to buy. It's really about the power that you can buy with it via the media where you can buy a publishing house, for instance, and decide what's going to be printed in newspapers. You can buy TV stations. You can buy your influence into politics. You can buy your influence into economics. It's really this power vessel that needs to be tackled. And once people have figured out, okay, we don't want more than this or that amount of private political power, then we can link this to private wealth. And at the same time, it's really important to realize that it doesn't just suffice to tax rich people. You also have to have a state that redistributes it in the welfare state kind of manner, where everybody gets what they need just because they're human beings, because that's frankly just implementing the Declaration of Human Rights. And so all of these things go into it. I don't have a private perfect answer, but I think about this a lot, and I encourage everybody to do so as well, because it's really about all of our world, frankly, at the end of the day.
Marlene, perhaps as a final question, how receptive have other ultra-wealthy people been to your message? I know that you were in Davos at a small protest with other ultra-wealthy individuals calling for tax justice, but is this a message on a large scale that you think is being received?
Yes, it is. I live in a bubble myself. Like I'm surrounded by people who think like I do and who support the cause and who also advocate for tax justice. I'm aware that not every wealthy person does this. Otherwise, we probably would have gone much farther already or not have the problem to begin with. But I think it's not so important to concentrate too much on what wealthy people think about this, whether or not they receive this well, because nobody gets asked whether they like to pay taxes. No working person is asked, do you like your income tax this way? Well, let's reduce it for you, shall we? That's not something that happens. This discussion is purely done within the wealth bubble, and that's because it's already assumed that wealthy people hold the power to be allowed to take this sort of decision and to make this sort of exception. And I think to have the democratic discourse and the public agree on what's best for the society at large, including some wealthy individuals who think further than their own nose, will bring us the answers we need, and not just asking what wealthy people think.
Marlene Engelhorn, thank you so much for joining us on Perspective this morning. That's unfortunately all we have time for.
Thank you very much for having me.